Welcome back. Today we're going to install a Apple CarPlay Android Auto radio that's Android based into a Mazda CX-5 2015 that also has the Bose system. So I've got a couple things I also added because we're going to try to retain the camera from the OEM camera. So one of these is a Metra harness to do that, and the other one is a 12 volt to a 6 volt to 12 volt harness, or vice versa, because I believe the camera in that car is a 6 volt. We want to go from 12 volt to 6 volt. And then here is the radio itself. Actually went with the octa-core, so it has the higher processing power, and it comes with a variety of cables, including a Pro Tool. And this one's the main cable that'll plug in and interface with the Mazda system. I also have a couple of Pro Tools of my own that I got from Harbor Freight, and I've got some quick connectors to hook up that camera, I hope. So it's all plug and play unless you want to keep that OEM camera. This kit in particular came with an aftermarket camera that we're not going to use if we get the OEM one working. That way we won't have to do anything to affix that camera to the car. And then once we pry off some of the trim, underneath the radio will be, the old radio will be 2 Phillips head screws and one either 8mm or 10mm socket. So that's the tools that you'll need. You'll only need those and maybe a pair of pliers and a couple other things for if you want to retain the camera. If you don't want to retain the camera and you want to go with theirs, all that should be in there, and the instructions on how to wire that up should be in there. A lot of that's plug and play, but it's not when it gets to wiring something into the reverse wire. You'll have to figure that out. Of course, now we're in the vehicle, and we're going to figure out how to pry off a couple of things. I think we're going to pry off this piece, and this will all come out. Here's one piece. And then we'll pry off this piece, and that'll let us get to Phillips head screw, and the socket that's holding it in. Use the Pro Tool that came with the radio, or use your own Pro Tools, and you want to work around the edge in different places. So we'll just keep working around it like that. Once I got a little bit of that pried off, I was able to get 2 hands under it and get as close as I could in here and on top, and gently but firmly tug it. And the rest of it popped out without breaking anything. And so one guy warned, don't unplug that and start the car. That's the emergency flasher, because it'll throw a code. Of course, you probably could reset that, but we're going to see if that can just stay right there while we work on it. If not, we'll unplug that, because I want to test the radio and other things. So now I'm going to figure out how to pry this away. I was able to gently, firmly pull on it from the underside. You don't want to dig into your dash too much. I didn't do any damage there, but I did put the Pro Tool there, and this is soft. I just know dashes cost a lot of money, and if you damage them, then you're in trouble. So now we can get to the screws. We got a Phillips head here and a Phillips head there, and then the 8 or 10mm that's right down there that you'll need a socket extension for. All right, got one Phillips head screw out. And then this is indeed, I already loosened it up. This is indeed back here a 10mm. Like I said, I pre-loosened that up. I had just enough room in here with this extension to get the socket on it, but now I can loosen it up by hand. Once you get that out, and there's just enough room to reach your hand back in there and to pinch the nut and pull it out, then the radio itself will slide right out with a little tugging. apparently. Maybe you need 2 hands to do it. That's why I can't. There we go. Well, you see how it may stick. So once you do that, you'll carefully pull until you can get your hand on the cables. And your pry tool that you had earlier for your dash may come into good use here to get the cables off. All of those came out of there relatively easily. The pry tool, to be able to press down on the little trigger latches, really, really great tip. So now here's the replacement radio. And you know, I have not been at work on this more than 15 or 20 minutes to get here, probably 20 minutes. This plug in this particular radio is the one that you'll use, and it's going to go here, and then you'll just figure out the other plugs as you go along, and I'll give you a recap of what I figure out on that. Just so you know what I've got here to try to repurpose the camera, I've got this harness, and I'm going to, it's an access, I think I said Metro earlier, but it's an access harness, and there's the part number. And it's going to interface with that green plug right there. I can already tell from, I believe, the plug, but we'll check that here in a second. Otherwise, I've plugged this main plug into here, that plugs straight into there, and then the 2 USBs that came with my kit, I plugged one there and one there. There's nowhere you can plug it wrong, really, in this radio kit. And then I plugged the antenna into here, and then this antenna right here is going to pick up somewhere. Okay, so I believe that now that I look at it, that this one's the antenna, and that this one is the camera, backup camera. So that's where this Metro harness plugs in. Again, this is the kit that I'm using. It's an access kit, actually. There's the part number. So there's a notable hiss because of the Bose system too. It's working, but it's probably not going to come across if I were to show you on the camera. But the hisses in the tweeters and the front speakers. And from what I've read, you may be able to get around this by using, see, all the speakers are coming out in and going into the Bose amp eventually in this vehicle. And they say that these may be overpowered to do that. So they provide you an alternative here of speaker outputs on a lot of these radios, and this radio is no different. So this one's an RCA out front left speaker. So this would have a absolutely should be no powered output to those speakers. And to get to those speakers, you wouldn't use these wires. So right in here you find your front speaker wires, and then use the RCA outputs. And you can use an aftermarket. I mean, I have a bunch of these laying around because of the stereos in our house from years ago. But for instance, I would plug this into there, one-handed anyway. Plug that into there, and then I would cut this wire, which has 2 wires in it, and I would find the front left speaker wires up here. And that's what I'm going to do. So wish me luck. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the front right. Now I'm only going to do this for the front speakers because the back speakers don't have the hiss. So that got rid of a lot of that hiss. And I realize this wiring's a bit of a mess, but in other words, what you're doing is you're taking the speaker wires out of here, and I already showed that the front left. This is going to the front left 2 wires. And I went in there, and I'm just going to show you one example. This is front left. So inside here are 2 wires, and the core wire in there, the center wire, is the positive. So in this wiring diagram, it actually went to the white wire coming out on this side, and I cut it. You can see where I cut it here. But on the other end, that was going into the wiring harness and into the cars, where that core wire went into there. And then for the white and black, which was the front speaker left, negative, I did the same thing with the other wire. And then you repeat that for the right speaker. And I only did that for the front 2 speakers, and it did get rid of almost all the hiss. So for my rear speaker wires, I just left those intact. So I changed those up. That hiss may not bother some people. It bothered me. So that got rid of it by probably having less power coming out of the other outputs. Hope that was about as clear as mud. Now I'm going to go back to looking at repurposing the camera. Alright, I got everything in. I'm going to sum up a couple of things. In the Mazda CX-5, I reused the camera. I used this access kit, Metra access kit. And what that does is it gives you, it plugs right in right there to the OEM harness. And then it gives you a RCA jack to plug the camera in. And that goes in this particular radio, goes in this little port. Now, I saw another YouTuber said that they had to switch the input for the video. I did not have to do that. As a matter of fact, I switched mine, and that really slowed me down. So don't mess with that for your average radio. His radio must have been different. But one thing that I did learn is that the reverse wire right here in the harness is only for trigger. It's only for trigger. Do not power your camera with it. So power your camera with a full-time 12-volt wire. In this case, I'm going to use the same one from the amp in mine. If not, you can patch into this red one that's in the harness. You can see I tried to patch into it with a ATA wire, and I just couldn't get through it, and I got frustrated, and I found another place to put it. Otherwise, the OEM harness all matches up. I did, mine has the my daughter's car has the Bose system, so I have the amp in here. So you do have to wire the blue wire and the pink wire in here to wire the amp, or if you've got another radio, figure that out. And then I wired the front speakers with RCA jacks into the harness to get rid of some hiss. So there's 2 ways to wire the speakers. Speakers with RCA jacks come out of this port, and then they're all in this bundle too. So I took the front speakers, I cut them off here. That's the front left, and the front right's the other gray pair. And I made sure I had the right positive wire and negative wire, and I put RCA jacks on the inputs and plugged them into the other harness. That got rid of the tweeter hiss. So I'm going to push all this back in and we'll test it. Okay, so we're good to go here. You see that we power on and everything. We've already done some test phone calls. They work fine. Apple CarPlay works fine. It's got an app here that once you use it once or twice and you have the Bluetooth on with wireless, the CP Link makes that work. Android Auto is also in here. The steering wheel controls work. And you do that with, you match those up with the steering wheel key. And then the OEM camera. It came with a camera, which is arguably higher resolution. But there's the OEM camera, and it works. The OEM camera was one of the most frustrating things. It's the fact that I also didn't cover this, but I put a voltage converter in there from 12 volt to 6 volt, and it's in line in there. And when I brought the power off of the amplifier, I used that converter in line in that to step it down, because in Mazdas the camera's a 6 volt. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.